Let's go to Trey Yingst, who is live in Tel Aviv with the very latest on the war with Iran. Hi, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Iran's Assembly of Experts has chosen a new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of Iran's former supreme leader who was killed in the opening strikes of Operation Epic Fury. Mojtaba Khamenei is a hardliner who has a history of ties to the IRGC and besieged forces. He was the gatekeeper for his father and widely known as the Shadow Prince. A number of civilians and residents in Tehran reacting to the news overnight saying this.
After an entire week of waiting, and of course the shock of the passing of Ayatollah Khamenei inflicted on the society, we are very glad that now the leader has been selected. Now we are sure that the path will continue with his leadership.
The Israelis continuing their strikes against the Iranian regime, targeting a number of positions in and around Tehran, besiege headquarters and other missile-launching positions used to threaten their country. And over the weekend, we saw those apocalyptic images of smoke and flames rising from the skyline in Tehran. 4 different oil facilities hit this weekend in Israeli strikes across the Iranian capital. The Israelis are still taking incoming Iranian ballistic missile fire. Just last hour, sirens were sounding in northern Israel. There's an understanding that this could last for a number of weeks, despite the fact that the Iranians have had much of their capabilities taken out in American and Israeli strikes. Still some damage caused to central Israel over the weekend, a number of shrapnel injuries in a number of locations where there were munition impacts from a cluster munition that was attached to the top of a ballistic missile. Now, the Israelis are looking to the east, but they're also looking north. You saw those live images from the Lebanese capital of Beirut. They are striking the Dakhia neighborhood of southern Beirut quite heavily. This is a Hezbollah stronghold, and the organization continuing to launch rockets over the border today, triggering sirens in the northern Israeli city of Haifa. The IDF telling Fox News over the weekend that at least 2 Israeli soldiers were killed in a Hezbollah attack in southern Lebanon. Todd, Carly?
Trey, there is this report from Axios. It says that Israel's strikes on 30 Iranian fuel depots on Saturday went far beyond what the U.S. expected. When Israel notified the United States in advance, they say this is sparking the first significant disagreement between the United States and Israel. And the concern on the U.S. part is that these Israeli strikes on infrastructure that serve ordinary Iranian citizens could strategically backfire. What can you tell us about this?
I've seen that article. I've not been able to match the reporting. Israeli officials say the coordination between the United States and Israel is at the highest level that it's ever been. They've described it as historic hand-in-glove cooperation to ensure that this operation moves forward. We do expect coordination to continue at the highest levels of the military. U.S. Central Command actually has individuals on the ground here in Israel in order to coordinate the strikes, and we do understand those strikes against the oil facilities were at least communicated in advance. Again, we haven't been able to match that the administration is upset with the strikes, but we do expect these heavy bombardments of the Iranian regime to continue as they try to degrade Iran's ability to have a strong economic structure, and also for their military to coordinate and communicate these attacks, not just against U.S. forces, but also allies in the region. Todd, Carly?
Trey Yingst live for us. Trey, thank you. With that, CENTCOM confirming that a 7th U.S. service member has died from wounds sustained in an Iranian attack as Operation Epic Fury rages on.
Steve Harrigan is live from the Armenian border, where Iranians are fleeing to escape this war. Hi, Steve.
Morning, Carly. I'm standing right here in Armenia, just across the river behind me. That's northern Iran. And of course, that 7th service member, the name has not yet been released because his family has not been notified yet, died from wounds by an Iranian drone attack in Saudi Arabia. In the meantime, 3,000 targets by the U.S. have been hit in Iran in the first week of the fighting. War Secretary Pete Hegseth says the war is just beginning for America, and now that the U.S. has air superiority, they'll be able to use more conventional bombs. Here's the War Secretary.
This is not a fair fight, and that's on purpose. Our capabilities are overwhelming compared to what Iran's are. And frankly, when you combine our Air Force with the Air Force of the Israeli Defense Forces, it's the 2 most powerful air forces in the world. The ability for us to be up over the top and hunting with more conventional munitions, gravity bombs, 500-pound, 1,000-pound, 2,000-pound bombs on military targets, that we haven't even really begun to start that effort of the campaign.
Finally, CENTCOM has announced the death of a National Guard soldier, Sorfly Davies, 46 years old, died from a medical emergency in Kuwait. He was also a New York City police officer. Guys, back to you.
Harrigan, thank you. With that, let us bring in visiting fellow at George Mason University and advisory chair for the Organization of Iranian American Communities, Dr. Ramesh Sepehrrad. Doctor, what is the Islamic Republic thinking in this selection of Mojtaba Khamenei?
I think we've made a full circle back to the 1979 where the struggle hasn't finished, because right now what we saw and what we see with Mojtaba, he is now the Ayatollah king of Iran, and this is why the Iranian people are in the streets and have been in the streets shouting down with the dictators, be it the king or the Ayatollah. And last night, even people took to the streets saying, down with Mojtaba. So I think the message here is that the regime has signaled the world that it's going to gear up for more repression. IRGC is going to gear up for more terrorism. And this is a full message of delegitimized regime that has been weakened at home and has been rejected in its entirety by the people of Iran. Nothing comes out of this regime that will be in favor of the Iranian people, and that's why we have to shift our focus to their call for regime change.
Here is the latest from Iran's foreign minister on how Iran views the next steps for them in this war. Watch.
We never give up, we never surrender, and we continue to resist as long as it takes. We continue to defend ourselves, and we are defending our territory, our people, and our dignity. And our dignity is not for sale.
Well, militarily, they can be forced to surrender, but can you kill this extremist ideology inside Iran?
I think the Iranian people have already told us that they're rejecting this extremist ideology. If the reason Mojtaba Khamenei was selected is an indication on how the inner circle of the regime is narrowing down further, and I think that's why they had to settle down for his son, this hereditary succession of the Ayatollah, because they're trying to bank on Khamenei's brand that stands for repression and terror. And I think that's, despite what the Iran's foreign ministry says, this is a regime that's been rejected by its public. This is a regime that has been confronted with a very strong resistance movement. And in fact, that resistance movement is been growing in the country and has been more and more organized. The National Council of Resistance of Iran has called for the provisional government to step in, and there will not be a vacuum after this regime falls down. And within 6 months, Iran can have a free and fair election where the sovereignty can be transferred to the people of Iran. We will see a much stronger call for republicanism now that the King Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei is in power, because that is what the Iranian people want. They want a secular republic, rejection of monarchy, rejection of theocracy, and moving forward to really throw both the King Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei and whatever is remnant of the previous dynasty of Pahlavi to the dustbin of history.
There are reports that some military members in the IRGC are laying down their weapons, not showing up to work. And obviously, that is going to be the key to determine how long the regime can hold on. But you also need the power of the people. And the more people you have on your side, the better if you're the United States. So, Doctor, if you were to break down by percentage, the number of people, percentage of people that still support this regime, and the percentage of Iranians that no longer or do not or never supported this regime, what would those numbers be, Doctor?
I think the best number that we can rely on, because Iran is not a democracy, we can't really study it and measure the percentage, but the best number that we can count on was the number of the turnout that came into the election of Masoud Pezeshkian's sham presidency. And I think that tells you that it is less than 20% of the Iranian people that are willing to even show up to the ballot box that is held by this regime. So majority of the Iranian people are rejecting this regime in every form of resistance. We see men, women, young people, old people, people from all walks of life, different Iranian nationalities, Kurds, Baluchis. This is what we need to harness on, the rejection of this regime in its entirety by the people of Iran, and recognizing their call for a secular republic. And that's why we see more and more support for the provisional government that was announced by Maryam Rajavi as as a way to bring this regime down and transfer the sovereignty to the people of Iran. And that's the future of Iran that we should rely on.
Well, we heard from War Secretary Pete Hegseth on 60 Minutes yesterday saying that this is not a fair fight, and that is, of course, by design. Dr. Ramesh Sepehrrad, we thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Doug.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.